and thanks for joining us. My guests today are Elizabeth McCarthy, Senior Director, Federal Civilian Market Solution Architect, Maximus, and Ron Leidner, Vice President of Client Engagement at Maximus. Thank you both for joining me today.
It's a pleasure.
We've got some important things to talk about. Let's first start with agency challenges. Elizabeth, when financial agencies are thinking about putting new software and technology in place, what are some of the biggest challenges that they face?
So I think initially it's just knowing where to start. When you're looking at an entire enterprise of legacy systems that all have interdependencies, it can be hard to know where to focus. And then just understanding the rapid pace of technology and change can be intimidating. If I make these changes now, am I outdated 6 months from now? So that's also something that can be concerning. And so many agencies, even interagency, operate in silos, and getting them all connected and on the same page and moving in the right direction together is a big challenge.
And Ron, Elizabeth's talked about knowing where to start. Where are some of the places that agencies get stuck as they're trying to move from strategy to execution?
Absolutely. So part of the issue that's has emerged recently is that there's a big surge right now in federal space for artificial intelligence. We hear it all the time. Use AI for this. And so folks are focusing more on the technology than they are on the business issues they're trying to solve, particularly in the federal space. If they have an issue with fraud or things like that, they're saying, well, how do I use AI to solve for the fraud? And they're not thinking about the workflow. How do I actually do the work that I need to solve for that problem? And so one of the big challenges right now is, and folks in the federal space are feeling like, I've got to focus on the technology first, but there's humans that are doing the work. And the humans doing the work are really the catalyst for how you leverage the technology to get it done. So they get stuck in that space, additionally get stuck in the situation right now where, from a budgetary perspective, folks at the working level are like, if I have a great idea, then how do I acquire the funding that I need, and how do I get the mission support that I need to get it done? So it changes in different agencies, but those are some of the things that we're seeing.
So they've got to make sure that their people are on board with the transition first.
100%.
So Elizabeth, can you share a story where one agency successfully made this transition that maybe other agencies could learn from?
Absolutely. One thing that a lot of agencies face is they have a large number of applications. And in particular, we worked with an agency that had an in-house application deployment process that was very manually intensive. And so to get all of their applications deployed and ready took a considerable amount of time, hours and hours and hours. So we helped them migrate to a fully automated CI/CD system in place using Ansible technologies. And we took 170 development teams, migrated them onto the CI/CD platform, and reduced the deployment time from 141 hours to under an hour.
So what were the most difficult parts of that transformation?
So getting all the programs on board, for sure, making sure that the training was in place for each of the program teams to understand the change from the manual processes to the automated processes, getting their concurrence that these changes were in their favor, saving them time, increasing security and other measures as well.
And Ron, given the example that Elizabeth just gave us, are there patterns that agencies follow when they're tackling these kinds of transformations?
So the patterns are interesting. So the current pattern in federal agencies and in government, the standard model has been for years that the information technology department is the department that's responsible for doing all of the modernization work or the changes that are required. And so over the years, folks have focused more on the information technology office as the pattern. When you're trying to get with the business units that are trying to say, here's the value we need out of the system and you're developing, many times the IT department, because of schedules and budgets, are so focused on their work that they develop the application, and the business looks at it and says, that's not quite it, And so that's a pattern right now that we're trying to, influence and change through an offering called product delivery, which is more collaborative, where the business and IT collaborate up front to address that particular challenge. Because the last thing you want is an application that shows up on your desk and doesn't meet what the expected intention of it was to solve for.
That makes a lot of sense. And Elizabeth, I know many agencies are still working off of legacy systems. And so if they're going to migrate to some new technology, like Ron has just described, how do they untangle that? It's obviously not just the CIO's responsibility. How do agencies bring all the right people to the table to get after the old process and transform it to a new one?
Sure. A lot of agencies have looked at refactoring as a solution, taking legacy code and just rewriting it in a new modernized language. And that presents some challenges in itself. You don't get any new functionality when you do that. You're not taking advantage of modern architecture when you do that. So our approach is really to consider what those applications, the legacy applications, are doing. And then understanding, is that code that we need to rewrite, or is there a new product, a technology, or architecture that will serve the same purpose and accomplish the what without diving into the nitty-gritty of the how it's being accomplished right now?
So how do you get the agency's workforce trained up to the new technology and the new methods?
Yeah, so the interesting thing, and one more thing on legacy, if I might, one of the main things that we have to get across to our federal customers is, it's legacy, okay? So if the legacy's working fine, leave it behind. We're trying to move you to a modernized state. We're trying to move you to that state.
Right.
But one of the things in government that needs to be emphasized is change management is something that starts on day one of any modernization. Many times our federal customers wait to the end and they say, we know we have to train it, but we're so busy right now actually building the system that we don't have time to train. We don't have time to develop training. But on day one, change management is so important. Is when you reach out to the constituency and say, prepare yourselves for this change. You analyze the audience. You find out what their demographics are. Are they change averse, or are they accepting a change? So you can plan for that, so that on day one, when you log into the new system, you don't have people that are saying, how do I log in? They already know, and they already know how it functions. So the change management component is something that we're moving up front. And we've seen that that's very, very effective when it starts on day one.
Well, change management is not just about technology. I mean, so many of our federal financial systems are ancient, written in COBOL, written using 1970s financial rules. So how do you bring modern financial rules and technology to these agencies as you're doing transformation? What are some of the most common missteps, or where are the solution spaces there?
Yeah, so Elizabeth talked about refactoring. Sometimes refactoring is good, and sometimes it's not. So those legacy systems, as you've said, those are built on technologies that are 60 or 70 years old. And so if you refactor it to Java or to another language, you're just making the ancient things less ancient. And so one of the things that we're really moving toward is accessing that data at rest. Don't take the programming language into consideration. Access the data, and the modern applications right now are allowing us to do things with data in workflows that weren't done in those old systems. And so it's more of a matter of getting access to the data rather than refactoring or having people say, now I've got to change my mind and I'm no longer an assembly language programmer anymore. Now I'm working in a commercial off-the-shelf product that allows me to do my job, or I can actually develop code in that platform that gets me where I need to be.
One thing that I would add, and this kind of goes back to the change management conversation, is communicating why change is important is a critical factor. So not just that we're doing this and you're going to start using it in this way and hey, it's coming, be ready, but it's important because it increases security, it allows you time for other things. Communicating those messages is almost as important as the technology changes itself.
That's a great point. And some of that change management is around data. Ron, you dropped the topic on the table, so let's go back to it. What are some of the challenges, especially with financial data, as you're living through this kind of technological transformation?
Well, of course, PII is a consideration. So understanding the requirements to safely handle and manage and move and report data that can contain sensitive information is always a consideration. But also just the volume of data is a challenge. We always say a lot of financial agencies are very data rich, but they're not necessarily insight driven from the data that they have.
Well, transforming business processes is one thing, but oftentimes these financial agencies haven't really thought about data management. So how do you get them thinking about this data-rich environment that they have when you're trying to modernize their business process?
So you need to, a lot of this is around informing people that the four-letter word data is really not a four-letter word, if you will. So it's more about having them understand the space that they're in. Elizabeth mentioned, PII a moment ago. An example that we've had with some of our customers is, they're like, we can't put our PII data in the cloud. We just can't do it. And our response is, well, why not? They're like, well, it's not secure. And they just don't know. They don't know that the space they're going is secure. And our response many times is well, there's a lot of other folks in the federal space that have their data there. We need to educate you more on the data management space so they can understand it, so that they're more not so reticent in moving toward it. So that's one of the big things. It's communicating what the space is, while we're actually doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
Could you give us an example of an agency that's sort of overcome those challenges? They've gotten a handle on their data, they've understood that, and now they're ready to move into the transformation?
So you want to go first?
Yeah. So sure. We do a lot of work with the Internal Revenue Service, and we support 2 data-centric contracts there: data delivery services, data support services, and an enterprise data platform. So we've done a couple of things that have really helped make a significant change. And we talk about governance, we talk about automation of ingest, validating early and often is very important. And the outcome is that we've set up some programs to help the IRS better manage and better understand their data. And one of those is called IT Operational Reports, or affectionately, ITORs. And ITORs is a monitoring of data being ingested. So if there is a failure, we're not trying to find it later. We can real time see this ingest is not working, address it right away. We don't have to deal with the issues that it presents to the data quality or other areas. And it's just been a phenomenal tool to help manage and make sure that the quality is consistent, and that when there are problems, they're identified very quickly and addressed very quickly as well. The other example that I have is called portfolio rationalization, and we are taking data and ingesting it from a variety of different siloed sources, and then cleansing that data, assessing the quality of it, and making it available for data calls. And what that does is it helps with getting data on infrastructure currency, making sure that applications are at their appropriate N-1 status. And then also assessing filing season readiness. Are this very large suite of applications ready to go when they have to be?
Right, so before the break, we were talking about many of the challenges that agencies face as they're going into one of these technological transformations. Elizabeth, what does it look like when an agency gets it right? Are there examples where they've made the conversion and now they have results that can be measured?
Absolutely, there are. And one of the areas where it really shows is in your ability to react quickly. So many financial agencies are driven by legislation, and legislation can happen at any time, forcing changes that need to be enacted very quickly in order to provide public response. So an example of that is the economic impact payments. And Maximus supported the IRS there. We were able to take legislation that dropped very close to the beginning of filing season and implement that and put changes in place in a very short period of time that identified all the taxpayers that were eligible to receive those economic impact payments so that they could be processed and paid out as quickly as possible.
That's a great example, and we're seeing more of those kinds of changes in the tax code even now. So are there things that the IRS, for example, is doing to respond to recent legislation?
Of course there are. We just had a very big legislative package passed that impacts tax law. So those changes are actively being made and implemented so that they are ready when filing season starts and taxpayers start filing their tax returns.
And Ron, how do agencies ensure that these improvements are not just short-term, but they're made for the long term? Elizabeth mentioned statutory directives, but are there other sorts of changes as well that need to persist?
many times what happens, we're in a reactionary mode a lot of times in the federal civilian space. And so, when crises happen, emergency funding is given to build something or address an issue that needs to be addressed. We're moving more toward, or suggesting that we move more toward a product delivery model where we talk about sustainability of large programs over years. What that requires is an alignment with the procurement function within an agency, the C-suite, the CIO, the CTO, the business function, finance, everybody working as a collaborative team to make sure that year over year we can sustain the changes that we're implementing. Elizabeth mentioned EITC. That's something that when legislation changes, we've got to make sure that if the code needs to come out, or if the code needs to be de-scoped or decommissioned out of that application, that there is funding and a route to take it out. And so it's more about making sure that we've got the framework set up for the agency that's aligned to the mission that allows us to ensure that we're able to continue to take care of those changes over time.
I would say, add to that there are a lot of shiny things out in the environment these days, certainly that draw the eye. And so making sure that all changes are aligned with strategic objectives is very important to make sure that those changes are sustainable over the long term.
Well, that's a great point, and these financial agencies are also dealing with a lot of technical debt, and they have uncertain investment budgets about how to make those kinds of changes. So Ron, back to a point you made in the first half too, where folks are thinking about the technology and not necessarily about the process. How do they reconcile all of this, their budget constraints, their need to invest, the technological changes, to make sure that what they're doing really supports their mission?
One of the things that is a challenge, but it's not an insurmountable challenge, is that I talked about collaboration earlier. So from the business side, from the strategic objective side that Elizabeth talks about, all the way down to the developer that's actually working on the new system, there needs to be an understanding and alignment across the board on what's being done. When that occurs, this all becomes a lot easier. When it's done in silos or segments, it's not. And so to address that, the communication side across the board has got to be open so people understand that you have a strategic mission objective, but it translates down to this business value that I'm trying to deliver. It's all a matter of making sure that everybody's in alignment. And it's a challenge right now in federal agencies because we work in silos. And so being able to build that bridge across is absolutely essential for us to be able to move forward, particularly in these times.
And so as folks as agencies are thinking about compliance and making sure that they're putting these systems in place to meet their mission and be compliant, how do they also think about the customers that they're serving? For example, you mentioned the IRS. Who puts on the filer hat to think about how this looks from the other side?
So
I would say that customer journey maps or citizen journey maps are incredibly important. And understanding the steps that they take to do the things that they need to do to interact with any federal agency is critical to making sure that the services that are provided are omni-channel, that meet them where they are, and perhaps even in the language that they're using.
Those are some really kind of new words, omni-channel, user-facing. Are there specific techniques that you all help agencies walk through to make sure they're taking that perspective?
Absolutely. I started off by mentioning journey mapping. So that is really looking at the end-to-end process, every step that you have to go through to file a tax return. Whether it's call your CPA and they do it for you, or you use TurboTax and put the data in yourself and then electronically file. And what could be the challenges along the way? What if that return is rejected? And then I have to figure out why and refile, and what does that look like? And understanding, okay, I need to contact the IRS. How do I do that? What method is best for me? What's quickest? What's the easiest? And so looking at it from all of those different perspectives. And then when you think about omni-channel, that means, is it email? Is it a phone call? Is it a video chat? How can we best provide those services and solutions to the public?
And the journey mapping part of it is something that's new to people that have worked in legacy systems. Because when you think about the individual master file at the IRS, that is a more than 60-year-old green screen system with no user interface. And so folks are used to using that internally. And so the IRS deals with tax that way. But now that we're trying to provide better service to the citizens, The omni-channel approach is the right approach. You journey map or you blueprint the approach out. Once our employees the IRS employees get comfortable with it, the citizens will naturally, come along. If they see something that's being presented, makes sense to the people that are actually doing the work, and we're providing it to the public, it's a much better way to go.
So Elizabeth, let me go to you then. We've talked about challenges that agencies face as they get ready for transformation. We've talked about best practices in the transformation. What are some of the new approaches and technologies that are showing promise for the future, helping agencies be more agile and responsive?
Well, of course we have to talk about AI tools, but before we do that, I do want to mention something that's not necessarily technology focused, but how agencies are procuring the services they need. And I think that a positive shift is moving to outcome-based contracting. So what frequently happens is that an agency decides they're going to modernize, and they have quite a hefty budget, and they spend that budget, but their satisfaction is down here on the scale. And so outcome-based contracting works to balance that scale a lot more, making sure that the government gets the changes that they need that align to the strategic objectives, that the business gets the functionality they need to be able to move forward in a successful way.
That's a great point.
And the administration is moving toward more use of commercial off-the-shelf products. In the news you hear about platforms like Palantir. There are low-code development platforms like Salesforce, Pega, ServiceNow, those platforms. And the idea here is to allow the business customer to be able to configure those tools to meet their needs. And so those tools themselves, those platforms, are very amenable to that. They provide that level of functionality. You don't have to be a programmer anymore to do it. You can drag and drop widgets into a workflow or into a journey map that meet the mission need. And so there's movement to that right now. So the low-code platforms or the no-code platforms, like Uncork as a no-code platform, is one that are ones that are being used right now to deliver value.
I hadn't heard of Uncork. That's new information. Elizabeth, quickly on the AI.
Of course. So, I think one of the challenges with AI is everybody wants to use it, and they're not sure how to use it, and they're not sure what it's really going to do for them. So really working with agencies to define their AI use cases. Are they looking to enhance development tools? Are they looking for something that can generate test data? Are they looking for something that can answer questions, that can act as a SME? Are they looking for something that can actually accomplish tasks like intelligent document processing? And understanding what their use cases are, help them implement it in a way. And then of course, the guardrails are super important. Having the policies in place, creating a culture that is not afraid of using it and engaging it, and upskilling your talent to use it and engage it, and how to use their time that is freed up from having an AI that can help them with their daily tasks.
Well, I think we're going to have to leave it there. Elizabeth and Ron, you've given us both so much to think about. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank today's guests, Elizabeth McCarthy, Senior Director, Federal Civilian Market Solution Architect, Maximus, and Ron Leidner, Vice President of Client Engagement at Maximus. I'm Federal Drive host Terry Gerton, and you're listening to the Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com, search Maximus.